Darius Johnson stood at the construction site, the sun beating down on his back, unaware that today would shatter everything he thought he knew about courage and sacrifice. Under the oppressive gaze of site manager Mr. Harris, a man whose prejudice cuts deeper than any steel beam, Darius is assigned to the most perilous tasks, forced to prove his worth in a world that seems determined to undermine him. Each day, he fights against the weight of expectations and bias, driven by his dream of providing a better life for his family. But when a moment of crisis arises, involving the young son of a powerful businessman, Darius finds himself at the crossroads of duty and danger. With lives hanging in the balance, he must confront not only the imminent peril, but also the deep-seated prejudices of those around him. But first, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge us to rise against the odds. The first rays of dawn barely pierce the morning fog as Darius Johnson's weathered pickup truck pulled into the empty parking lot of the Metropolitan Tower construction site. At 5:45 a.m., he was, as usual, the first to arrive. The half-finished skyscraper loomed above him, its skeletal frame reaching toward the pale sky like outstretched fingers. Darius stepped out of his truck, his steel-toed boots crunching against the gravel. At 42, his 6'2" frame carried the muscle memory of 20 years in construction. His dark skin bore the marks of countless days under the sun, and his hands told stories of dedication through their calluses and small scars. Another day, another dollar, he muttered to himself, adjusting his hard hat as he made his way toward the site office. The familiar weight of his tool belt settled around his waist as he walked, each step purposeful and measured. The sound of approaching vehicles drew his attention. Mike and Carlos, two of the younger workers, were arriving for their shift. Darius's face broke into a warm smile. "Morning, fellows," he called out, raising his hand in greeting. "Beat the traffic today." Carlos, still stifling a yawn, shook his head. "Man, I don't know how you do it, Darius. Getting here this early every day." "Early bird gets the worm," Darius chuckled, falling in a step beside them. "And the good parking spots." As they approached the site entrance, Darius noticed Mike struggling with his safety harness, the straps tangled in a way that could prove dangerous later. "Hold up there, Mike," Darius said, stopping him with a gentle hand. "Let me show you something." With practiced movements, he demonstrated the proper way to adjust the harness. "See how it should sit tight across your chest? That could save your life one day." Mike's face reddened slightly. "Thanks, Darius. They didn't cover this stuff in orientation." "They never do," Darius replied, his voice carrying a hint of concern. "Listen, both of you, when you're up there today, remember, check your clips twice, watch your footing, and never take your eyes off your surroundings." Carlos finished with a grin. We know. You're like a walking OSHA manual. A manual that's kept me alive for 20 years, Darius responded, pride evident in his voice. More workers began arriving, and Darius greeted each one by name. There was Thompson, the crane operator who always had a newspaper tucked under his arm. Sarah, the site engineer who appreciated Darius's attention to detail. And Rodriguez, whose first day on the job had been saved by Darius's quick thinking when a beam had shifted unexpectedly. The peaceful morning routine was shattered by the arrival of Mr. Harris's gleaming black SUV. The site supervisor emerged, his expensive boots notably clean of any construction site dirt, his press shirt a stark contrast to the workers' worn clothing. "Johnson," Mr. Harris's voice cut through the morning air like a whip. "Get up to the 32nd floor. The welding team needs an extra hand." Darius frowned slightly. "Sir, I'm scheduled for groundwork today. The concrete pour." Did I stutter? Mr. Harris interrupted, his pale face reddening. "There's been a change of plans. Or is the work too high up for you?" The implied message wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. Several workers exchanged uncomfortable glances, but nobody spoke up. "No, sir," Darius replied evenly. "I'll head up right away." As he gathered his welding equipment, Sarah approached him discreetly. "Darius, that's not right. The weather report mentioned high winds today." It's not safe to weld up there. It's all right, Sarah, Darius assured her, though his eyes betrayed his concern. I've handled worse. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was long and solitary. Darius used the time to pull out a worn photograph from his wallet. The smiling faces of his wife Monica and their 3 children, James, 12, Lisa, 9, and little Marcus, 6, looked back at him. The photo was creased and faded, but it was his daily reminder of why he endured everything with dignity. A memory from the previous evening floated through his mind. Marcus sitting on his lap, showing him a drawing of a tall building. Look, Daddy, I drew where you work. The pride in his son's voice had made Darius's heart swell. The elevator doors opened to a gust of wind that confirmed Sarah's concerns. The 32nd floor was still mostly open to the elements, with temporary guardrails that seemed to sway slightly in the breeze. As Darius set up his equipment, he noticed Jake, a fellow welder, approaching with an apologetic look. Hey man, Jake said, lowering his voice. Harris is full of it, sending you up here today. Listen, I've got your back. If the wind picks up too much, we call it off, okay? Safety first. Darius nodded gratefully. Thanks, Jake. You're good people. Nah, just returning the favor. Remember when you caught that mistake in my measurements last month? Saved me from a world of trouble. Their conversation was interrupted by the crackling of Darius's radio. Johnson. Mr. Harris's voice came through, distorted but still sharp. I don't hear any welding happening up there. Do I need to find someone more capable? Darius keyed the radio. No, sir. Starting now? The morning progressed with Darius carefully making his way across the steel beams, each weld precise despite the challenging conditions. During his break, he sat with his back against a column, watching the city spread out below him. The height didn't bother him anymore. 20 years had cured him of any fear of heights, but the deteriorating safety conditions at the site were increasingly concerning. His thoughts drifted to the previous night's conversation with Monica. She had been folding laundry while he helped James with his math homework. The bills are piling up, Darius, she had said quietly after the kids were in bed. The orthodontist says Lisa needs braces, and James's school trip. We'll manage, baby, he had assured her, pulling her close. I'm up for that promotion to site safety coordinator. Mr. Harris can't ignore my experience forever. But they both knew the reality. In 5 years under Mr. Harris's supervision, Darius had watched younger, less experienced workers get promoted over him time and again. A loud metallic clang snapped Darius back to the present. Across the floor, a section of guardrail had come loose, now hanging precariously over the edge. Darius quickly secured his harness and moved to fix it, knowing that the next person might not notice the danger in time. As he worked on the guardrail, Mr. Harris's voice crackled over the radio again. Johnson, site meeting in 10 minutes. Ground floor. Darius secured the last bolt and checked his work twice before heading down. The site meeting turned out to be another opportunity for Mr. Harris to assert his authority. Some of you, Mr. Harris announced to the gathered workers, his eyes fixing on Darius, seem to think they know better than management about how this site should be run. Let me be clear. Anyone who can't follow orders without questioning them might want to consider finding another job. The message wasn't subtle. Several workers shifted uncomfortably, and Darius felt their eyes on him. He stood straight, his expression neutral, even as Mr. Harris continued his thinly veiled criticisms. After the meeting, Thompson approached Darius by the water cooler. That man's got it out for you, Darius. It ain't right. It is what it is, Darius replied, taking a long drink. As long as the pay keeps coming, my kids get to eat. That's what matters. You're a better man than me, Thompson said, shaking his head. But watch yourself up there. I've been seeing things that don't sit right with me. Loose materials, unsecured tools. Yesterday, I spotted a harness with worn straps still in circulation. Darius nodded grimly. He'd noticed the same things. The increasing number of near misses, the corners being cut to meet deadlines, the safety protocols being ignored. But every time he tried to raise these concerns, Mr. Harris shut him down. The rest of the day passed in a blur of steel and sparks. As the sun began to set, Darius made his final checks before heading down. He paused at the edge of the floor, looking out over the city as it began to light up for the evening. Behind him, he heard the distinct sound of something rolling across the floor, probably an unsecured tool that could become a deadly projectile for the workers below. He turned to investigate, his flashlight beam cutting through the growing darkness. The light caught something that made his blood run cold. A large wrench, teetering on the edge of the building, left behind by the day's shift. One good gust of wind and Darius carefully made his way over and secured the wrench, adding it to his tool belt. It was heavier than it needed to be for the reminder it provided. On this site, danger wasn't just about the obvious risks. Sometimes it was the small things, the overlooked details, that could prove fatal. As he drove home that evening, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. The Metropolitan Tower cast a long shadow across the city, a daily reminder of both his pride in his work and the challenges he faced. Tomorrow would bring another day of proving himself, of watching out for his colleagues, of enduring Mr. Harris's prejudice with dignity. But tonight, he had a family waiting for him. As he pulled into his driveway, he could see Marcus's face pressed against the window, waiting for his daddy to come home. Lisa's bicycle lay in the yard, and the sound of James practicing his trumpet filtered through the open windows. Monica's garden, their small piece of paradise, bloomed with early spring flowers. Darius sat in his truck for a moment longer, saying a quiet prayer of thanks for making it through another day. As he reached for his lunchbox, his hand brushed against the loose guardrail bolt he'd picked up earlier. A small but potent reminder of the thin line between safety and disaster that he walked every day. The front door opened, spilling warm light onto the porch, and Marcus came running out. "Daddy's home! Daddy's home!" Darius stepped out of his truck, leaving the dangers of the construction site behind for another day. But as he embraced his son, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was building at the Metropolitan Tower. Something more dangerous than loose guardrails and unsecured tools. Something that would soon force him to choose between staying quiet and standing up for what was right. For now, though, he had dinner to eat, homework to help with, and bedtime stories to read. Tomorrow's challenges would wait until tomorrow. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when an unusual buzz of activity swept through the Metropolitan Tower construction site. Word had spread quickly. Robert Crawford, the CEO of another construction company, Crawford Development, and this project's primary investor, was making an unscheduled visit. Even more surprising was the news that he was bringing his 7-year-old son, Tommy. "This ain't a typical inspection," Thompson muttered to Darius as they watched workers scrambling to tidy up the site. "Crawford never shows up without notice." Darius nodded, adjusting his safety harness while observing the controlled chaos around him. The site had transformed in the past hour. Debris had been cleared, tools properly stored, and even Mr. Harris had traded his usual scowl for an artificial smile. "Look sharp, everyone," Mr. Harris's voice carried across the site. Mr. Crawford's car just pulled up. A sleek silver Mercedes rolled to a stop in the designated visitor parking space. The driver's door opened first, revealing Robert Crawford's imposing figure. Despite being in his late 40s, he moved with the energy of a much younger man. His tailored suit and polished Oxford shoes seemed at odds with the dusty construction environment, but his confident stride suggested he was no stranger to job sites. The back door opened, and out jumped Tommy Crawford, a small whirlwind of energy in a child-sized hard hat and a Batman t-shirt. His eyes immediately went wide at the sight of the towering cranes and skeletal structure reaching into the sky. Daddy, look how tall it is," Tommy exclaimed, pointing upward with unbridled excitement. "Can we go all the way to the top?" Mr. Crawford chuckled, taking his son's hand firmly in his. "Not today, sport. This isn't a playground. It's a serious workplace with lots of dangerous equipment." Workers straightened their postures as the pair walked past, offering respectful nods and greetings. Mr. Crawford's reputation preceded him. Unlike many developers, he was known for treating his workers fairly and maintaining high safety standards on his sites. Wow! Tommy gasped as a crane swung overhead, carrying a massive steel beam. How does it not fall? Is that crane driver a superhero? Mr. Crawford explained, waving to the crane operator. He's been doing this job longer than you've been alive. Thompson gave a friendly honk of the crane's horn in response, making Tommy jump with delight. Mr. Harris hurried forward, hand extended. Mr. Crawford, what a pleasant surprise. If I'd known you were coming. That's precisely why I didn't announce it, Harris, Crawford interrupted smoothly. I prefer to see things as they really are. His eyes swept across the site, taking in details that others might miss. And today, I thought it was time for Tommy to see how these things worked. Tommy was barely listening, his attention captured by everything around him. The welding sparks falling from upper levels looked like falling stars to his young eyes, and the rhythmic sound of hammering created a construction site symphony he'd never experienced before. Mr. Crawford knelt down to Tommy's level, turning the boy to face him. His expression grew serious. Tommy, I need you to promise me something very important. This site can be dangerous if you're not careful. You must stay close to me or Mr. Harris at all times. No wandering off. No exploring on your own. Do you understand? Tommy nodded solemnly, though his eyes still darted around with barely contained curiosity. I promise, Daddy. But can we watch them build stuff? Please. Of course. Mr. Crawford smiled, ruffling his son's hair. He stood and turned to Mr. Harris. Harris, I need to inspect the progress on the east wing. Would you mind keeping an eye on Tommy for about an hour? Show him around the ground level only, and make sure he stays safe. Mr. Harris's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, sir. Tommy will be in good hands. As Mr. Crawford walked away with his tablet and blueprints, Mr. Harris's demeanor shifted subtly. He glanced at Tommy with poorly concealed annoyance, clearly viewing the babysitting duty as beneath his position. From his workstation nearby, Darius watched the interaction while securing support beams. He recognized the look in Tommy's eyes. It was the same one his own son Marcus got just before getting into mischief. The boy was practically vibrating with contained energy, his head swiveling to follow every movement and sound. And over here, Mr. Harris was saying in a bored tone, is where we store the building materials. His voice trailed off as his phone rang. Excuse me, Tommy. Don't move. I need to take this. Darius noticed Tommy's gaze drift upward to the maze of scaffolding and partially completed floors. The boy's feet shifted restlessly, and his hands fidgeted with the strap of his hard hat. Several times, he took small steps toward the stairs when Mr. Harris wasn't looking, only to quickly step back when anyone glanced his way. Setting down his tools, Darius approached Mr. Harris, who was still engrossed in his phone conversation. Mr. Harris, Darius said quietly, waiting for acknowledgement. When none came, he cleared his throat and tried again. Mr. Harris, sir? What is it, Johnson? Harris snapped, covering his phone's microphone. Can't you see I'm busy? Sir, I think Tommy needs closer supervision. He keeps looking at the scaffold stairs, and... Mr. Harris abruptly ended his call, his face flushing with anger as he turned to face Darius. You know what your problem is, Johnson? You think you know better than everyone else. Than me. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. I've had about enough of your suggestions and your superior attitude. Darius held his ground, keeping his voice steady. Sir, I'm just concerned about the boy's safety. He's showing all the signs of... Enough! Mr. Harris's shout drew attention from nearby workers. Since you're so eager to share your opinions, why don't you make yourself useful on the 35th floor? The welding team up there could use an extra hand again. But sir, that's not my assigned. Your assignment is whatever I say it is. Mr. Harris cut him off. Or would you prefer to find another job? I'm sure your family would understand. The threat wasn't subtle. Darius glanced at Tommy, who was now edging closer to the scaffold stairs while everyone was distracted by the confrontation. Mr. Harris, please, just keep a closer eye on. Get up to the 35th floor. Now, Mr. Harris's tone left no room for argument. And Johnson, one more word about how I should do my job, and you'll be looking for new employment. Understood? Darius's jaw tightened, but he nodded. As he gathered his tools, he tried catching Thompson's eye in the crane, hoping to silently communicate his concerns. But Thompson was focused on moving a large beam, his view of the ground partially obscured. The elevator ride to the 35th floor felt like torture. Through the metal grating, Darius could see Tommy growing smaller on the ground level. Mr. Harris already back on his phone, pacing away from the boy. Each floor the elevator passed increased the distance between Darius and the impending disaster he could sense coming. At the 35th floor, the wind whipped stronger, forcing Darius to secure his safety harness to the nearest anchor point. From this height, he had a clear view of the entire site, including Tommy, who was now standing at the base of the scaffold stairs, looking up with unmistakable curiosity. "Come on, Mr. Harris," Darius muttered, watching the site's supervisor continue his animated phone conversation several yards away from Tommy. "Just turn around. Just look." But Mr. Harris didn't turn around. Instead, he walked even further away, disappearing behind a stack of construction materials, leaving Tommy completely unsupervised. Darius's hands tightened on his welding torch. He was too far away now to do anything but watch as Tommy, seizing his opportunity, took his first steps onto the scaffold stairs. The boy's small figure began ascending, each step taking him further from safety. The wind gusted again, stronger at this height, and Darius could hear the metallic groan of the scaffolding. His expert eye caught details that made his heart race. A loose board 3 levels up, a gap in the guardrail on the 10th floor, tools left precariously close to edges that could spell disaster if knocked off. "Thompson," Darius shouted down to the crane operator, but his voice was lost in the wind and the distance. Abandoning his tools, he ran to the emergency stairwell. He had to get down, had to reach Tommy before. A cry of excitement drifted up from below. "Wow, I can see everything from here." Tommy's voice, carried by the wind, sent chills down Darius's spine. The boy was already several levels up, his Batman t-shirt visible through the metal framework as he continued to climb higher. Darius began his descent, moving as fast as safety would allow. Each second felt like an eternity. Each floor he passed a reminder of how far he still had to go. Above him, he could hear the distinct sound of small footsteps on metal stairs, growing closer to the dangerous sections he'd noticed earlier. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. Mr. Harris had sent him up here to punish him for speaking up, and in doing so, had removed the one person who might have prevented this situation. Now, that decision could cost them dearly. Tommy Crawford's small figure continued to climb the scaffolding, his Batman t-shirt fluttering in the increasing wind. Having reached the 15th floor, he paused to marvel at the view, completely unaware of the danger he was in. Below him, the construction site carried on its usual activities. Workers focused on their tasks, machinery humming, and Mr. Harris still nowhere in sight. "Look at all the tiny cars." Tommy called out to no one in particular, his voice barely audible over the wind. His small hands gripped the metal railing as he inched closer to the edge of the platform, drawn by curiosity to a section where the safety barrier was incomplete. Darius, still racing down the emergency stairs from the 35th floor, caught glimpses of Tommy through the framework. His heart nearly stopped when he saw where the boy was heading, a section they'd marked for barrier replacement just yesterday. The temporary rope barrier would be no match for a child's weight. "Please stay put, please stay put," Darius muttered under his breath, taking the stairs 2 at a time while still maintaining as much safety as he could. 20 years of experience told him exactly how this could end if he didn't reach Tommy in time. Thompson, up in his crane, was the first to notice something was wrong. From his elevated position, he had a clear view of Tommy approaching the dangerous section. He immediately hit the crane's horn in warning, but the sudden noise only startled the boy, making him jump slightly and step even closer to the edge. "Hey, what's that kid doing up there?" someone shouted from below. The cry caught the attention of other workers, who began looking up. Sarah, the site engineer, immediately grabbed her radio. Emergency on level 15. Unsecured child on the scaffold. Tommy, now aware of the attention he was drawing, took another step backward, directly toward the gap in the safety barrier. The wind, which had been steadily increasing all morning, gusted strongly, causing the scaffolding to sway slightly. "Daddy," Tommy called out, his voice now tinged with fear as he finally realized how high up he was. "Daddy." Darius had reached the 20th floor when he heard Tommy's cry. 5 more floors to descend, but he could see the situation deteriorating rapidly. The boy was now just feet away from the gap, and the wind was growing stronger. "Hey," someone shouted from below. "Don't move. Stay exactly where you are." But Tommy, startled by the voice, spun around too quickly. His foot caught on an uneven section of the platform, and he stumbled backward. His small hand reached out to steady himself, grabbing the temporary rope barrier. Time seemed to slow down as Darius watched the rope barrier begin to give way under Tommy's weight. The boy's eyes went wide with terror as he felt the support disappearing behind him. A collective gasp rose from the workers below, followed by the clatter of dropped tools and equipment as everyone froze, watching the scene unfold. Darius didn't think, he acted. Abandoning all protocol, he vaulted over the side of the emergency stairs, using his safety harness like a zip line to drop the remaining floors. The cable screamed as it unspooled, the friction burning through his gloves, but he didn't feel the pain. "Hold on, Tommy," he yelled, even as he saw the boy's feet beginning to slip out from under him. The next few seconds were a blur of motion. As Tommy's body began to tilt backward into empty air, Darius reached the 15th floor platform. Without hesitation, he unclipped his harness and lunged forward, his body sliding across the metal grating. His right hand shot out, catching Tommy's arm just as the boy's feet left the platform entirely. The force of the catch sent a shooting pain through Darius's shoulder, and he could feel the metal grating cutting into his chest through his work shirt. Tommy's scream pierced the air as he dangled stories above the ground, held only by Darius's grip on his arm. The boy's hard hat fell, tumbling end over end toward the ground below, where it landed with a crack that seemed to echo across the suddenly silent construction site. "I've got you," Darius grunted, his left hand finding purchase on a support beam. "I've got you, son. Don't look down." But Tommy was beyond hearing. His small body thrashed in panic, making it even harder for Darius to maintain his grip. Tears streamed down the boy's face as he screamed for his father. With every ounce of strength he possessed, Darius began pulling Tommy back onto the platform. His muscles screamed in protest, and he could feel something tear in his shoulder, but he didn't let go. Inch by inch, he dragged the boy back to safety. As soon as Tommy's feet touched the platform, the boy collapsed against Darius, his small body racked with sobs. His hands clutched Darius's work shirt so tightly that his knuckles were white, and his whole body shook with terror. "Chill. You're safe now," Darius soothed, wrapping his good arm around Tommy while trying to hide how badly his other arm was trembling. "You're okay. I've got you." The sound of running footsteps announced the arrival of other workers who had rushed up to help. Sarah reached them first, her face pale with shock. "Oh my God," she whispered, taking in the scene, the broken rope barrier, the scratches on the platform where Darius had slid, the visible trembling of both Darius and Tommy. "Get a first aid kit," Darius managed to say through gritted teeth. His shoulder was on fire, and he could feel blood seeping through his shirt where the metal grating had cut him. Tommy's sobs had quieted to hiccups, but he refused to let go of Darius. "I want my daddy," he whimpered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What the hell is going on here?" Mr. Harris's voice boomed across the platform as he finally arrived, his face purple with rage. He took in the scene with narrowed eyes, focusing immediately on Darius holding Tommy. "Johnson, get your hands off Mr. Crawford's son immediately." He stormed forward, reaching for Tommy. The boy cried out in fear and clung tighter to Darius. "No, he saved me. Don't make me let go. But Mr. Harris wasn't listening. I sent you to the 35th floor. What are you doing down here? This is a clear violation of direct orders and safety protocols. Sir, Sarah tried to intervene. Darius just saved Tommy's life. He was about to fall. Fall? On my sight? Mr. Harris's face grew even redder. That's impossible. I was watching him the entire time. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the gathered workers. Thompson's voice carried down from his crane. Like hell you were. You were on your phone the whole time. Silence. Mr. Harris roared. He turned back to Darius, who was still sitting on the platform, one arm protectively around Tommy while the other hung uselessly at his side. Johnson, you're fired. Pack your things and get off my site immediately. A collective gasp went up from the workers. Sarah stepped forward again. Mr. Harris, you can't be serious. Darius just prevented a tragedy. What I see, Mr. Harris snarled, is an employee who disobeyed direct orders, abandoned his assigned post, and put Mr. Crawford's son in danger through his reckless actions. Security will escort you out, Johnson. Darius finally spoke, his voice steady despite the pain he was in. Sir, with all due respect, I tried to warn you about Tommy's safety. If you had just listened, how dare you? Mr. Harris cut him off. You're lucky I don't have you arrested for endangering a child. Now get up and leave. The tension on the 15th floor platform was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mr. Harris stood with his chest puffed out, face still red with anger, as he tried to regain control of the situation. Everyone back to work, he bellowed, his voice echoing off the steel beams. This isn't a theater show. Time is money, people. The gathered workers remained frozen in place, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Tommy, still trembling from his near-death experience, had finally been pried away from Darius and stood clutching the sleeve of his Batman t-shirt, tears streaming down his face. Come on, Tommy, Mr. Harris said, his voice artificially sweet as he grabbed the boy's shoulder. Let's get you somewhere safe while we wait for your father. Mike, one of the younger workers Darius had trained, suddenly stepped forward. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. This isn't right, Mr. Harris. We all saw what happened. Darius saved Tommy's life. Mr. Harris's head snapped around, his eyes narrowing dangerously. Would you like to join Mr. Johnson in the unemployment line, Martinez? Because that can be arranged. Mike's courage wavered under the supervisor's threatening glare, but he stood his ground. Sir, he was just... One more word, Mr. Harris hissed, and you'll never work construction in this city again. Is that clear? The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Mike's shoulders slumped as he stepped back, unable to meet Darius's eyes. Darius stood quietly, his injured shoulder throbbing, as he began gathering his tools. His calloused hands trembled slightly as he picked up his well-worn tool belt, the same one he bought when he first started in construction 20 years ago. Each movement sent sharp pain through his shoulder, but he forced himself to continue, maintaining his dignity even as his world crumbled around him. Darius, Tommy's small voice cracked with emotion. Please don't go. Please. The boy tried to run back to Darius, but Mr. Harris's grip on his shoulder tightened. That's enough, Tommy. Mr. Johnson is leaving, and he's not coming back. No. Tommy struggled against Mr. Harris's hold. He's a hero. Let me go. Darius. The boy's cries echoed through the half-completed building, bouncing off steel and concrete until they seemed to come from everywhere at once. Workers on other floors stopped what they were doing, looking up at the commotion. I said move. Mr. Harris snapped, practically dragging Tommy toward the stairs. Security, escort Mr. Johnson out. Now! As the security guards approached apologetically, Darius straightened his spine, refusing to be pushed out like a criminal. He walked under his own power, his head held high despite the humiliation burning in his chest. Behind him, Tommy's voice grew more desperate. Darius, don't go. Please. You're my hero. The words struck Darius like physical blows, each one making it harder to maintain his composure. As he reached the stairs, He allowed himself one last look back. Tommy was still struggling against Mr. Harris's grip, his face red from crying, while the other workers stood in uncomfortable silence. Sarah, the site engineer, caught his eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry," before quickly looking away. Thompson, up in his crane, gave a small salute, a gesture of respect that nearly broke Darius's carefully maintained control. As Darius descended the stairs, he could hear the whispers starting. Workers on various floors stopped to watch him pass, their conversations barely audible, but clear enough. "Can't believe they're firing him for saving a kid. Harris has gone too far this time. Somebody should report this. Did you see how he caught the boy? Like a superhero." At ground level, Rodriguez had his phone out, seemingly focused on some paperwork, but clearly recording the scene. Several other workers were doing the same, their phones partially hidden, but lenses gleaming in the morning sun. Darius walked to his locker, the security guards following at a respectful distance. As he cleaned out his few personal belongings, a family photo, his spare work gloves, a half-empty bottle of water, he could hear more whispers behind him. "This ain't right," someone muttered. Harris was the one who wasn't watching the kid. Somebody should tell Mr. Crawford the truth. "You saw how Harris threatened Mike. He'll fire anyone who speaks up." Darius closed his locker for the last time, the metal doors clang, feeling somehow final. 20 years of dedication, of showing up early and staying late, of mentoring younger workers and maintaining the highest safety standards, all ended because he'd done exactly what any decent human being would do. The drive home was a blur. His shoulders screamed in pain with every movement, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the weight in his chest. How would he tell Monica? How would they manage without his income? Lisa's braces, James's school trip, Marcus's upcoming birthday. All the plans they'd made now seemed to evaporate like morning dew. As he pulled into his driveway, Darius saw Monica through the kitchen window, preparing lunch for Marcus, who had a half day at school. She looked up at the sound of his truck, her smile quickly fading as she realized something was wrong. The front door opened before he reached it. "Darius? Why are you home so early? Are you hurt?" He tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "We need to talk, baby." Inside, Marcus looked up from his coloring book, his face lighting up. "Daddy, you're home." "Hey, champ," Darius managed, ruffling his son's hair with his good hand. "Why don't you go play in your room for a bit? Daddy needs to talk to Mommy." Once Marcus was out of earshot, the whole story poured out. Monica listened in stunned silence as Darius described Tommy's climb, the rescue, and Mr. Harris's reaction. By the time he finished, tears were streaming down her face, though she tried to hide them. "So that's it," she whispered. 20 years of service, and they just fire you? For saving a child's life." Darius slumped in his chair, the events of the morning finally catching up with him. "I couldn't let him fall, Monica. He's just a little boy, not much older than Marcus." "Of course you couldn't," Monica said fiercely, wrapping her arms around him while being careful of his injured shoulder. "You did the right thing. We'll figure something out. We always do." Back at the construction site, the story was spreading like wildfire. Sarah had downloaded copies of the security camera footage before it could mysteriously disappear, and Thompson had used his elevated position in the crane to take photos of the entire incident, including the broken safety barrier that should have been replaced days ago. The workers gathered in small groups during their lunch break, their conversations focused on nothing else. "Did you see how fast Darius moved? If he hadn't been there, Harris is trying to cover his own ass. That boy would be dead if not for Darius." Mr. Harris stalked through the site, breaking up any groups he saw talking, but he couldn't stop the spread of information. By early afternoon, the story had reached other construction sites in the city. Workers from neighboring projects were calling their friends, sharing the video, expressing their outrage. Meanwhile, Mr. Crawford had finally returned to the ground floor, having been delayed by an urgent call from the project investors. Mr. Harris intercepted him before he could reach Tommy, who was being watched by Sarah in the site office. "Mr. Crawford," Harris began, his voice oily with fake concern, I need to inform you about a serious incident involving your son and one of our former employees. Crawford's face darkened. Former employees? Yes, sir. I had to terminate Darius Johnson immediately. His reckless behavior put Tommy in serious danger. He abandoned his assigned post on the 35th floor, violated multiple safety protocols, and that's not true. Tommy's voice rang out from the site office doorway, where he stood with Sarah. His face was still tear-stained, but his eyes blazed with anger. Darius saved my life. Mr. Harris is lying. Mr. Harris's face paled slightly. Tommy, you're upset and confused. What you think you saw? I'm not confused. Tommy shouted, his small fists clenched. You were supposed to watch me, but you were on your phone. You ignored me. And when I got scared up there, Darius saved me. He caught me when I was falling. Robert Crawford's expression had grown increasingly thunderous as he listened to his son. Falling, he said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Harris explained. No. But before Mr. Harris could respond, Sarah stepped forward, her tablet in hand. Mr. Crawford, I think you should see this. She pulled up the video that was now circulating among the workers. The footage was crystal clear. The heart-stopping moment when Tommy nearly fell, Darius's heroic rescue, and Mr. Harris firing Darius while Tommy sobbed and protested. With each passing second of the video, Mr. Crawford's face grew darker. By the time it ended, Mr. Harris had taken several steps backward, as if trying to physically distance himself from the evidence of his negligence. Sir, I can explain, he began, but Crawford held up a hand, silencing him. My son, Crawford said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage, nearly died today because you were too busy on your phone to do the one thing I asked of you. And then you fired the man who saved his life. Mr. Crawford, you don't understand the full situation. Oh, I think I understand perfectly. Crawford cut him off. The question is, do you understand what's about to happen? Sarah, the site engineer, stepped forward first. Mr. Crawford, she said, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. There's something else you should know. What happened today? It's not an isolated incident. Harris's face went pale. Sarah, remember what we discussed about team loyalty. Loyalty? Another voice cut through the tension. It was Mike, the young worker who had tried to defend Darius earlier. Is that what you call threatening to blacklist anyone who speaks up? The dam had broken. Workers began stepping forward, each with their own story to tell. Darius warned him about the loose guardrails last week, one worker said. Harris ignored him and wrote him up for insubordination. Thompson called down from his crane, his voice carrying clearly. Remember the incident with the faulty crane cable? Darius spotted it during his morning check, but Harris accused him of trying to slow down the project. He always gave Darius the most dangerous assignments, Rodriguez added, his phone still recording. Always with some excuse about how he was the most experienced. But we all knew the real reason. Crawford's expression darkened with each new revelation. The real reason? He asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah stepped forward again, tablet in hand. I've been keeping records, sir. Incident reports, work assignments, safety violations. There's a clear pattern of discriminatory treatment. Darius was passed over for promotion 3 times despite having the most experience. He was routinely assigned to the most hazardous tasks without proper backup. His safety concerns were consistently dismissed or met with disciplinary action. Harris's face had gone from pale to ashen. These are baseless accusations. I have always maintained the highest professional standards. Professional standards? Crawford's voice cut through the air like a whip. Let's talk about professional standards, Harris. Where were your professional standards when you were on the phone instead of watching my son? Where were they when you ignored safety concerns that could have cost lives? Where were they when you fired a man for saving my child's life? The site supervisor took a step backward, colliding with the door frame. Sir, I can explain everything if you'll just... Oh, you'll explain everything, Crawford assured him, pulling out his phone. But not just to me. He dialed a number, putting the call on speaker. Janet? Get me George Matthews, CEO of Metropolitan Construction, immediately. And call OSHA. We need a full site inspection immediately. Also, contact HR and legal. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. Harris's face went through a range of emotions: fear, anger, desperation. Mr. Crawford, please, let's discuss this privately. I'm sure we can come to an understanding. An understanding? Crawford's laugh was without humor. The only thing I understand is that you put my son's life at risk through your negligence, then tried to cover it up by firing the man who saved him. And now I'm learning this is just the tip of the iceberg. He turned to Sarah. How long have you been documenting these incidents? Nearly 2 years, sir, she replied, scrolling through her tablet. I started keeping records after the 3rd time Darius reported safety violations that were ignored. I have dates, times, witness statements. Excellent, Crawford nodded. Send everything to my office immediately. And Harris? He turned back to the site supervisor, who seemed to be shrinking under the collective gaze of his workers. Consider yourself suspended, effective immediately. Security will escort you off the premises. Suspended? Harris sputtered. You can't. I can, and I am. Pending a full investigation into your conduct, your access to all development sites is revoked. Crawford's voice was ice cold. And if even half of what I'm hearing is true, suspension will be the least of your worries. The same security guards who had escorted Darius out earlier now stood uncertainly near Harris. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. Sir, one of the guards said to Crawford, should we collect his site credentials now? Immediately, Crawford confirmed. And I want all his files secured before he can access them. Sarah, please supervise that process. As the reality of his situation sank in, Harris's composure finally cracked. This is all Johnson's fault, he burst out. He's been undermining me from the start, turning the workers against me. No, Mr. Harris, Tommy spoke up, his young voice carrying a wisdom beyond his years. This is your fault. Darius was nice to everyone. You were the mean one. A murmur of agreement ran through the gathered workers. More people were stepping forward now, eager to share their experiences. Remember when Darius stayed late to help me learn the safety protocols? He covered my shift when my daughter was sick. Always the first to arrive, last to leave. Never complained, even when Harris was clearly targeting him. Crawford listened to it all, his expression growing grimmer with each new story. Finally, he turned to his assistant who had arrived during the commotion. Karen, I need you to do something important. Find Darius Johnson. Get his address from HR if necessary. Tell him. He paused, looking at Tommy, who was watching him expectantly. Tell him Mr. Crawford and his son would like to speak with him. And Karen, make it clear that this is about making things right. As Harris was led away by security, Crawford pulled out his phone again, this time calling his legal team. John? Yes. I need you to prepare something immediately. We're going to make this right, and we're going to make sure it never happens again. Tommy tugged at his father's sleeve. Is Darius coming back, Daddy? Crawford knelt down beside his son again. If I have anything to say about it, Tommy, he'll be back in a position where he can do what he does best, keeping everyone safe and teaching others to do the same. The gathered workers began to disperse, but there was a new energy on the site. Something had shifted, and everyone could feel it. The truth had finally come to light, and with it came the promise of change. As Sarah coordinated with security to secure Harris's files, she paused to look at the last photo on her tablet. A shot of Darius training new workers, his patient smile and careful instruction evident even in the still image. She smiled, knowing that justice was finally being served. Meanwhile, across town, Darius's phone began to ring. He stared at the unknown number, unaware that the call would change not just his life, but the lives of countless others who would benefit from the changes his story would bring about. The Metropolitan Tower stood silent against the afternoon sky, its incomplete structure a testament to work yet to be done. But now, perhaps, that work would be carried out with the respect, safety, and dignity that everyone deserved. And it all started because one man refused to look the other way when he saw something wrong. Tommy looked up at the building, then at his father. "Daddy, can we make sure everyone knows what Darius did? Not just today, but all the other good things too." Crawford smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "Yes, Tommy. I think it's time everyone knew the truth about Darius Johnson." And as the sun began its descent over the city, casting long shadows through the building's framework, a new chapter was about to begin. One that would reshape not just the Metropolitan Tower, but the very foundation of how things were done in the construction industry. All because one man had the courage to do what was right, no matter the cost. The morning sun cast long shadows through the Metropolitan Tower's skeletal frame as workers gathered in the makeshift assembly area at ground level. The mood was different from any other morning. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that something important was about to happen. Darius Johnson stood at the back of the crowd, still uncertain about why he had been called back to the site. His wife Monica stood beside him, gripping his hand tightly. His shoulder was still sore from the rescue, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional turmoil of the past few days. Robert Crawford stood on a temporary platform, commanding attention without having to ask for it. Beside him stood Tommy, wearing a new Batman t-shirt and practically bouncing with excitement. Behind them were several suited executives, members of the Crawford Development Board and representatives from the construction company's upper management. "Good morning, everyone," Crawford began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "We're here today to address something that should have been addressed long ago. But first," he turned, gesturing toward the back of the crowd. "Darius Johnson, would you please come forward?" All heads turned. Darius felt Monica squeeze his hand one last time before gently pushing him forward. The crowd parted like water, creating a path for him to walk through. As he passed, workers, his former colleagues, nodded respectfully or patted his shoulder. "Mr. Johnson," Crawford said as Darius reached the platform. "Or may I call you Darius?" "Either is fine, sir," Darius replied quietly. "Very well, Darius. 3 days ago, you saved my son's life." Crawford's voice cracked slightly with emotion. "But I've learned that wasn't the only brave thing you've done on this site. For years, you've been the conscience of this project, speaking up about safety violations, protecting your fellow workers, maintaining the highest standards even when it cost you personally." Tommy couldn't contain himself any longer. He rushed forward, throwing his arms around Darius's waist. "You're my hero," he declared loudly, causing chuckles to ripple through the crowd. Crawford smiled at his son's enthusiasm before continuing. "What happened to you was more than just unfair. It was wrong. The way Mr. Harris treated you, the discrimination you faced, the retaliation when you tried to protect others. It stops today." George Matthews, the CEO of the Metropolitan Construction, stepped forward. His usual corporate polish was tempered by genuine remorse. "Mr. Johnson," he began, "on behalf of Metropolitan Construction, I want to offer our deepest apologies. We failed you. We failed to recognize your dedication, failed to hear your concerns, and failed to protect you from discrimination. The investigation into Mr. Harris's conduct has revealed a pattern of behavior that should never have been tolerated." Darius stood straight, his expression carefully controlled, though those who knew him well could see the emotion in his eyes. Matthews continued, "Mr. Harris has been terminated, effective immediately. His actions, particularly his treatment of you and his negligence regarding Tommy's safety, were inexcusable. But the problem goes deeper than one man. We're implementing comprehensive changes to ensure nothing like this ever happens again." A murmur ran through the crowd. Sarah, standing near the front, smiled knowingly. She had helped compile much of the evidence that led to this moment. Furthermore, Matthews added, "We want to make this right. We're prepared to offer you full back pay for all the overtime you were denied, compensation for the discriminatory treatment you endured, and, if I may," Crawford interrupted smoothly, "I have a different proposal." He turned to Darius. "I've created a new position, Director of Safety and Worker Relations for all Crawford development projects. The job comes with full benefits, a a significant salary increase, and most importantly, the authority to implement and enforce safety protocols across all our sites. Darius blinked, stunned. Sir, you don't have to answer right away, Crawford assured him. But I want someone who has proven they'll put safety and people first, no matter the personal cost. Someone who has demonstrated real leadership and integrity. Someone like you, Darius. The crowd erupted in applause. Thompson honked his crane horn in celebration, setting off a chain reaction of cheers and whistles. Darius felt tears welling up in his eyes, years of suppressed emotion finally breaking through his careful composure. He thought of all the times he'd been dismissed, all the safety concerns that had been ignored, all the younger workers he'd tried to protect. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. I would be honored, sir. The applause grew louder. Workers began calling out, That's our guy. Nobody deserves it more. Way to go, Darius. Tommy was still hugging Darius, beaming up at him. Does this mean you'll be working with my daddy? Can you teach me about construction too? Darius laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. Maybe when you're a bit older, buddy. The celebration was interrupted by the arrival of several news vans. Word had gotten out about the story. A construction worker fired for saving a child's life, only to be vindicated when the truth about systematic discrimination came to light. A reporter from Channel 7 pushed forward with a microphone. Mr. Johnson, how does it feel to be recognized after years of unfair treatment? Before Darius could answer, more questions came flying. Is it true you risked your own life to save Tommy Crawford? Can you comment on the discrimination you faced? What changes do you hope to see in the construction industry? Crawford stepped in, handling the media with practiced ease while giving Darius a moment to compose himself. This story is about more than one incident or one person, he told the reporters. It's about standing up for what's right, about the courage to speak truth to power, and about making sure every worker goes home safely to their family at the end of the day. The story was already spreading beyond the construction site. Local news stations were running segments about workplace discrimination and safety violations. Social media was buzzing with clips of Tommy recounting his rescue and Darius's unfair dismissal. But more importantly, real change was happening. Matthews announced the creation of an anonymous reporting system for safety violations, mandatory anti-discrimination training for all supervisors, and regular safety audits by independent inspectors. These changes will be implemented across all our sites, Matthews declared. And Mr. Johnson, Darius, will have full authority to expand and enhance these measures as he sees fit. Crawford added, We're also establishing the Johnson Safety Initiative, a program to train and support construction workers in maintaining the highest safety standards. Because what Darius has shown us is that one person's commitment to doing what's right can make a difference for everyone. As the formal announcements concluded, workers came forward to congratulate Darius. Mike, the young worker who had tried to defend him, was among the first. You taught me everything I know about safety, Mike said, his voice thick with emotion. Now you can teach everyone. Sarah approached with her tablet. I've already started compiling data for safety improvements, she said with a grin. Ready to work when you are, boss? Thompson called down from his crane. Don't forget about us up here. Some of these safety harnesses have seen better days. Darius looked around at the faces of his colleagues. No, his team now, and felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For 20 years, he had fought an uphill battle, trying to protect others while facing discrimination and retaliation. Now, finally, he had the authority to make real changes. Monica had made her way through the crowd to join him, tears streaming down her face. I'm so proud of you, she whispered, hugging him carefully to avoid his injured shoulder. We did it together, baby, he replied softly. All those times you told me to stay strong, to keep doing what's right. Daddy. Tommy's voice cut through their moment. Can Darius come to my school for career day? I want everyone to know about my hero. The crowd laughed, and Darius felt a warmth spread through his chest. This was more than justice. It was an opportunity to make sure no other worker had to face what he had faced, that no other family had to worry about their loved one's safety on the job. As the morning progressed and workers began returning to their tasks, with new safety equipment being distributed and old harnesses being replaced, Darius stood looking up at the Metropolitan Tower. The building seemed different now, not just a construction project, but a symbol of change. Crawford approached him quietly. "Ready to get started? We have a lot of work ahead of us." Darius nodded, already making mental notes about priority safety improvements. "Yes, sir." "And Mr. Crawford? Thank you for believing in me." "No, Darius," Crawford replied, watching his son chatting animatedly with some workers about his rescue. "Thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like." Above them, the Metropolitan Tower stretched toward the sky, its unfinished state now a promise of better things to come. And Darius Johnson, who had always done the right thing even when it cost him everything, finally had the chance to build something even more important than a building, a legacy of safety, respect, and justice for all workers. The morning sun caught the steel beams above, creating a pattern of light and shadow that seemed to point toward the future. A future that, thanks to one man's courage and integrity, would be safer and more just for everyone who worked to build it. In the end, Darius not only fights for his own dignity, but also for the safety of a child and the respect of his peers. His journey teaches us about the strength of character and the importance of community. What do you think is the most important quality someone can possess when facing adversity? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more inspiring stories that resonate with us all.